Many thanks, Marachi. Well, the home-based Super Eagles today won their first test match since arriving in Pretoria, South Africa for the final phase of preparations for the African Nations Championship. The team beat South Africa's Premier League side Amatux 3-0. Sunshine Stars Tunde Adeniji scored a brace, while midfielder Ifeanyi Matthew got the third for the side. The Eagles play their first Grade A friendly against fellow Chan-bound team Angola at the Tuks University Stadium in Pretoria on Wednesday. That's tomorrow. They also tackle another Chan-bound team, Pt.4, on January the 11th before they depart for Rwanda on January the 15th. The Minister of Youth and Sports, Solomon Dalong, has charged managers and users of sporting facilities in Nigeria to develop a good maintenance culture. He believes the poor state of infrastructure in the country is getting worse because those in charge of the facilities do not take proper care of them, and when they go bad, they are abandoned.
The problem of Ministry of Youth and Sport Development has been that most of the ministers have not stayed longer than a year and 6 months. Critical decisions like the ones dealing with attention of facilities like this cannot be taken and implemented within 6 months. Even the attitude of those responsible had also been wanting, because there are some things that do not require capital intervention, and yet these things are left unattended to. Is indeed unfortunate. If I will have the opportunity to stay long and pursue my attitude towards these facilities, I think I will assure Nigerians that at the end of the period with which I will be a minister, I will be able to correct erroneous history.
Nigeria's Minister of Youth and Sports, Solomon Dalong. World Football Governing Body FIFA has recommended that its former Secretary General, Jerome Valcke, is banned from football for 9 years. Valcke was alleged to be implicated in a scheme to profit from the sale of World Cup tickets. The Frenchman, who also faces bribery allegations, denies any wrongdoing. A statement from the Ethics Committee also recommended that he pays a fine of 100,000 Swiss francs for alleged misuse of expenses and other infringements of FIFA's rules and regulations. Manny Pacquiao has confirmed his showdown with Timothy Bradley on April the 9th, which will be his last fight. Now, Pacquiao's promoter, Bob Arum, last week revealed doubts about his fighter's retirement plans, but the 37-year-old has now set the record straight by saying he will hang his gloves after the bout to focus on his political career. Now, Pacquiao lost a controversial split decision to Bradley in 2012, but then cruised to a one-sided points victory in their rematch 2 years later. Now, Chris Gayle has been fined $7,300 by his club for making inappropriate comments to a female reporter in a live television interview. After scoring 4-1 from 15 deliveries for the Melbourne Renegades on Monday night, the former West Indies captain suggested to Mel McLaughlin that the pair go out for a drink and made remarks about her appearance. Cricket Australia Chief Executive James Sutherland has also criticised Gayle, who has since apologised for his behaviour. And that's a wrap on sports news. I'm Ayotunde Balogun. The news at 10 continues shortly.
U.S. President Barack Obama has announced new gun laws in the United States using his presidential powers. The president's plan would subject sale of guns to background checks, and only federally licensed gun dealers must conduct background checks on buyers. The White House has also put sellers on notice that the administration plans to strengthen enforcement, including deploying 230 new examiners the FBI will hire to process background checks. A tearful Barack Obama gave his remarks surrounded by survivors and relatives of victims of shootings, recalling mass shootings in the U.S. in the past few years and everyday gun violence in cities like Chicago.
In Dr. King's words, we need to feel the fierce urgency of now.
Who never imagined that their loved one would be taken from our lives by a bullet from a gun. Every time I think about those kids, it gets me mad. And by the way, it happens on the streets of Chicago every day. So, all of us need to demand a Congress brave enough to stand up to the gun lobby's lies. All of us need to stand up and protect its citizens. All of us need to demand governors and legislators and businesses do their part to make our communities safer.
The VOA's Cindy Sain joins us now on the News at 10 for more on this. Cindy, thank you for joining us on the News at 10.
Pleasure, thank you.
Well, we very rarely see U.S. President Barack Obama shed a tear, and here he is making this address surrounded by survivors and surrounded by some victims of gun violence. Do you think that it's been timely that the president make this new laws just before during election year?
Well, you're right. It was an astounding emotional reaction, very raw emotion coming from the president, and that has gotten a lot of attention. And everyone is talking about how the president obviously tried to control himself, but got emotional talking about first graders being gunned down 3 years ago in Newtown, Connecticut. And you're right, it is an election year, but the president has just been frustrated by Congress not taking action. The Senate tried but failed. The House has not even taken up any gun control legislation. So the president says that now is the time for him to act.
And what do the new restrictions entail exactly?
Well, as you said, the main focus of it is to expand background checks for people selling guns online and also at gun shows across the country, so that they would also, right now it's just gun stores that have to require would-be buyers to have background checks. And the president is trying to keep guns out of the hands of those who have criminal records or mental health problems.
Cindy, well, gun violence has only recently increased in the United States in recent years. Can access to guns be the only reason for gun violence?
Well, no, and Republican lawmakers were quick to react, and also sort of a passionate response from some of them. House Speaker Paul Ryan said that the president's executive actions were almost a form of intimidation, that it was an overreach, that he was violating the Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which does guarantee the right to bear arms. And many Republicans say that it is more a mental health issue, and that the president should concentrate on enforcing the laws that are already on the books now, and not go it alone and bypass Congress as he's done with these executive actions.
Speaking of executive actions, it's not the first time the president has gone over and above Senate to pass a law. I do understand the Republicans would fight back, but what are Democrats saying about the president's action?
Well, Democrats are saying that it is high time and that it is past time for Congress also to act. And Democrats are citing some polls which cite that most Americans, maybe 70–80%, support at least the substance of the president's measures, calling for expanded background checks, for example, and even limiting some assault weapons, which the president is not trying to do with these executive actions. So it really depends on these polls how the questions are asked.
Well, the people affected here are, basic Americans, those who have been victims of gun violence and those who have been survivors, those who have had family members, who have lost family members, as President Barack Obama said in his speech. How are they reacting to the gun laws? Are they happy that it's finally come, or are they thinking it's a bit too late?
Well, you're right. And some of them were standing with the president, some of the parents of the first graders who were killed in the violence, and one former Congresswoman, Gabby Giffords, who herself was the victim of a mass shooting 5 years ago in Arizona. She was shot in the head and managed to recover, and is a strong advocate now for curbing gun violence, for gun safety measures. And she was also on hand. Many of the victims and their families are praising the president and saying they hope that he makes this a major focus of his last year in office.
Cindy, thank you so much for joining us on the News at 10.
Thank you.
The VOA's Cindy Sain joining us from Washington, D.C. And the main news again. President Muhammadu Buhari has promised that his administration will look inwards and enforce regulations to stop financial leakages. The president said the federal government will adopt global best practices in generating more revenue to lessen the effect of dwindling oil prices. The IMF Managing Director, Christine Lagarde, has affirmed that Nigeria does not need any intervention from the international financial institution. The Economic and Financial Crimes Commission has arrested the publicity secretary of the People's Democratic Party, Chief Olisamitu, and arraigned the party's former national chairman, Haliru Bello. That's the News at 10 tonight. Thank you for watching. I am Amarachi Ubani. Good night.